it's very cold, but we thank God.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. So we will have to welcome you again so we can proceed with your testimony from where we stopped the last time when you came in. So we just wanted to do some formalities, waiting for the secretary to come in so that we can just get into it right away. But we apologize for keeping you this long. We were also dealing with the budget. You know, the budget consideration is always something else.
Yes, indeed, indeed. But meanwhile, Mr. Chair, if I may just make a comment.
Okay, you go ahead.
Yes, I know that the last time when I last appeared before you, you indicated that it's possible
Yeah,
that I may be recalled to conclude.
yes,
And I, of course, bore that in mind when I was leaving. And you also know that I, at my personal expense, came all the way to the country in person and gave a whole week to the assembly to assist with your inquiry.
yeah.
And so I am just pleading that I hope that it won't again be a whole day proceeding today. I am on official mission in the US. I have had to really reschedule some of my meetings today because of this committee. And I really urge that we do the best we can to make sure that we don't basically that we can focus and go to the heart of the matter and finish up as quickly as possible because I have other engagements. I am not in my workplace. I have travel, as you know, and really I have had to reschedule some of my engagements here because of this hearing today.
All right, that's fine. I've heard you. I'm not too sure we're going to stay long, but of course, um, the you will deal with the council on that. Council will be taking us through, of course, and also the high table. Maybe we'll have few questions for you, but it's not going to take the whole day. I can assure you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, I see Council Ka. She
Yeah.
likes to spend a lot of time. So um, this is indirectly for her as well.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. All right, Yao, you done? So, no, we're waiting for you people to come in now. Thank you, Secretariat. It has been reported that the quorum do exist for the Special Select Committee to commence business. Honorable members, honorable colleagues, today is Monday, 24th of November 2025. We have Honorable Abubacarr Tambedou as our witness for today. As usual, I'm sure we don't need to go into the introduction because already that was clear. Mr. Tambedou knows everyone on this table. We need not to introduce ourselves. Can you hear me, Mr. Tambedou?
Very clearly, Chair.
Perfect. So quickly, what we will do, I will have to hand over to Kansuka for a continuation of the testimony where we stopped the last time. Of course, I know maybe new issues will come out from the questions that she's going to ask. But I don't want to preempt, of course. Kansuka, you can go ahead with the witness. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Chair, thank you very much. Welcome back to the National Assembly, Mr. Tambedou.
Thank you.
We're just going to continue from where we stopped. I do not foresee this being a long session. It's not going to be a long day. There are just a few things that were outstanding the last time you appeared. If you can recall correctly, you can remember that the last time you appeared, the session ran late and we had to stop. That is why we could not continue. So like I said, I don't expect it to be a long session. Right?
I'll be grateful for that. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. The last time the last time you appeared before this committee, one of the last issues we dealt with was the landed property and the sale process, how it started. Especially, we also discussed the task force that was set up, the interministerial. If you can recall, one of the questions I had put to you was that is there a signed or finalized version of the report? And I don't know whether you can remember, but I told you that the committee has received different copies of, or different submissions rather, of that said report. The report, you have also submitted it to the committee via email, and the title of the report, it says final report of the interministerial committee on properties that have been forfeited to the state pursuant to the commission of inquiry into the financial activities of public bodies, enterprises and offices as regards their dealings with former President Yahya AJJ Jammeh and connected matters. So this is the report I am referring to, which you have also submitted to this committee, a soft copy. However, of all the copies that the committee has in its possession after submissions by different members of the task force, even the Ministry of Justice and other departments, what we found is that there's no signed, the members of the committee or task force did not sign this report. So the committee is now at should I say at a loss rather on which of these versions should the committee take now as the final version of this report. Can you provide more clarity for the committee,
yes,
so we know which one to work with?
Are you saying there are different versions of that report?
Not different versions, basically the same report submitted,
yes,
by different members including yourself, other
yes,
members of the task force, and even the Ministry of Justice.
yes,
And it did not stop with the Ministry of Justice or members of the task force. Basically, any even from OP, that is the issue. Final signed version of the report.
okay, so what
Just let the committee know if there was never a signed version, and that the version that is circulating, that everyone has submitted, is the one that the committee can work with.
Okay, so just to be clear, there is a report, and the question is whether that report was signed or not, but it is the same report with all the relevant stakeholders.
Yes, and even the one you submitted, when you scroll to the last page, you will see that the names of the members of the task force are there, but it's not signed.
Yes, I can only tell you what I recall.
Okay.
And from my recollection, of course, my memory increasingly fails me as my hair gets more gray. But I can only tell you what I recall. I recall clearly that there was a request to get the report signed by the members, And for some reason, I am under the impression that we signed it, I signed it. But even if it was not the case, if you look at the email trail that I submitted to the committee together with the report, it clearly indicates that I have requested the Secretary to Cabinet to share the report around so that the members of the committee can sign it, and then we can submit it to Cabinet. So that is in the trail of the email. In fact, there are other exchanges about a part of the report amongst the members of the ministerial task force. So that email exchange suggests that clearly the request was made for the report to be signed. In fact, the email trails also indicate that all the members were provided with electronic copies of the report, and there were comments on the report. You can see all that also in the email exchanges. So it was for the Secretary to Cabinet to make sure that the members of the task force signed. But if they had not signed, that would have been an issue if there was a dispute as to the contents of the report. But if there are no issues and all the members agree that the report reflected the decision making of the task force, then there should not be a problem, I think.
Very well. The reason this question is posed is that, as you know, at the end of its work, this committee has to prepare a report, and it will rely on all the documentary evidence that it has received from the various ministries and departments and individuals that have appeared, or others that have not appeared but have submitted evidence, and also rely on the oral testimonies of witnesses that have appeared before it and those that have given statements. Now, what you I'm sure you would appreciate that the committee would always want to rely on evidence that is factual, not something that is now going to be put a publication and then there's dispute, oh, this was not what was finalized. That is just what is being avoided here. That is why this question is being asked again. But I will go with your submission until otherwise is raised by any of the witnesses or any individual that had something to do with the said report.
I fully understand your concerns, but you're covered by two facts. First is that I have shared with you an email exchange between members of the task force on the report and requested for comments, and there were comments made on the report. And two, the report was finally submitted to the Secretary to Cabinet. Again, that was shared with you, the email correspondences, where the Secretary of Cabinet was requested to get the committee members sign and share it in Cabinet. And the report was presented in Cabinet verbatim, in Cabinet, and the Cabinet minutes must be there. And there was no objection to any part of that report, be it when it was shared amongst the task force members by email, or when it was sent to the Secretary to Cabinet, or indeed when it was presented to Cabinet.
Okay, all right, very well. Let's move ahead. The last time where we stopped with the land and properties is that we talked about the ones that we sold, the ones that actually were sold during your time. And now what I just want us to take a step back on the we've already discussed the sale process and the receiver has explained the sale process to the committee, but still on the ministerial task force and the report prepared, there was a technical support team. If I can refer to a subcommittee, a technical subcommittee of the ministerial task force, which was comprised of permanent secretaries of the different ministries that were supposed to be members of the said task force, and was chaired by the Solicitor General, just as the ministerial task force was chaired by the Minister of Justice. What um, what purpose did this technical committee serve for the task force?
The technical committee was established by the ministerial committee. It was not established by either the Jani Commission or any other entity. It was the ministerial committee that established this technical committee for several reasons. I will indicate a few here. First, it was to provide a secondary layer of transparency in the process, so that the decision-making process would have been subjected to a primary and secondary um, process of transparency or level of transparency. That was the first. The second one was because the ministerial committee, these comprise ministers. They do not have the time or the luxury of going through the whole Journey Commission report. I suspect I am the only cabinet minister who went through the entire report at the time, but I will not guarantee that, but that's my suspicion. And so really, instead of the ministers going through the report and trying to implement the recommendations of the Journey Commission as accepted by the government in its white paper, we thought it would be helpful to have our technical advisors go through the report and then advise the ministerial committee on the recommendations in terms of the use of each of the properties. Their role was really advisory because we thought they could do what the ministerial task force could not do. That is, go through the entire report, look at all the properties one after the other, and then advise in their best judgment how each property should be dealt with. There were 280 properties or 88 properties, I believe, in the report. But it's not a question of just going through the list of properties. It's also going through the report, the entirety of the general report, to see what the commission recommended and to see what the government accepted in the white paper, and then to advise the ministerial task force on the best use of each of those properties. That was the purpose of the technical committee.
Okay. And after the technical committee went through the reports and had their deliberations, I would assume they would prepare some form of report or some form of prepare something, report or guidelines for the task force in order to aid the task force when it came to decision making and to be able to report back to cabinet. Is that correct?
Yes, they did submit a report after they completed their exercise.
All right. So the properties were in different categories. I'd say there were properties that were within the tourism development area. There were properties that were within the Greater Banjul area, like leased properties. There were freehold properties within Banjul, but also there were regional properties within the different regions in the country, that there were no leases but were registered with the district authority in these different regions across the country. Now, I know the report says all properties forfeited to the state. So that would mean that all properties were considered by the ministerial task force and its technical subcommittee. Is that correct?
I would like to assume that the technical committee certainly went through the entire list because their report is very comprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot say the same for the ministerial task force. I don't think the ministerial task force went through the entire list of properties. As I said, it was a long list and the ministers did not have as much time. And so we were adopting a piecemeal, if you like, approach to looking at the properties at that point in time. So we had certainly not looked at all the properties as at that moment when I was there.
Sorry, I was muted. So at the time, or let's say up to the time you left the Ministry of Justice and you were no longer the Attorney General, as far as you know, the properties that were considered were the leasehold properties and the ones within Banjul.
I don't think we looked at the properties in terms of lease and freehold and customary tenure. I think what we did was we went through the list of properties. We looked at those that we should start
Okay.
identifying for the receiver to sell. So perhaps we just followed the itemized list that the Journey Commission had, because I think if I recall clearly, the commission identified the landed properties by region. So Banjul, then KMC, then West Coast. So I think that was what the ministerial committee also did. We also just went through the list, starting with Banjul, and just identified the properties that we instructed the receiver to start selling.
Okay, but it's because if you look at the receiver's reports, or even there's a report you submitted to cabinet as well. It's part of the reports that you shared with this committee. You have submitted to the committee. It's I can read out the title of that report as well. It says report of the Presidential Task Force on the assets forfeited to the state pursuant to the Jana Commission recommendations submitted to Cabinet on the 23rd of April 2020. It's a shorter document, and if you scroll a few pages down, you would see the sale had been conducted in phases, or the sale had already started. It's reporting on the sale that has already been conducted, and it includes properties within the Banjul area, within um, the Kanifing municipality, and goes up to areas in Brufut, Kersering, Brufut, Kololi. It's a report you also shared with this committee in the email that you sent the forwarding the first report. You have a copy with you, or at least can you recall the contents of said report?
Well, first, that's the only report that I, as chair of the ministerial task force, submitted to cabinet. The final report was not prepared under me. Perhaps you can check the date of that final report, but it's certainly not while I was there. We had not submitted a final report because the report that I was part of was the first of several that I anticipated as we would continue our deliberations as the task
Okay.
force. So that's the only report that I can associate myself with.
Okay.
I do recall, yes, to the extent possible, the contents of that report, because I personally drafted that report and shared it with my colleagues in the task force. So because I drafted it, I believe I recall the contents of that report. So if there's any particular part of it you want to draw my attention to, please go ahead.
Okay, that's fine. You said something that it's not the final report was not submitted during your time as the Attorney General. Did I hear that correctly?
Indeed, indeed.
So,
Yeah.
okay, you were Minister of Justice up until which date?
30th of June 2020.
Okay. 30th June 2020.
That's right.
All right. Well, you sent us the final report. You also submitted the final report, rather.
I'm not sure I shared the final report,
Okay.
but I saw
All
it
right.
while I was there.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but certainly it's not a report that, as you can see,
Mhm.
the report that I was part of was submitted in April, and
Yes.
May, June, 2 months after that I left. So
Okay.
we couldn't have submitted a final report within a 2 month period
All
after the
right.
initial report.
That's fine. So the reason why I asked about the final report and the update is that if you look at the report you submitted to cabinet on the 23rd of April 2020 and compare its content, especially for the properties that were sold during your time as AG, and compare what is in the final report, there are, did I say, clashes? Because, for example, let me refer you to your, or you did state that you don't have a copy with you there.
But go
Is
ahead,
that
go ahead.
okay? I'm reading from the end of page 7. Sorry, page 6 and going into page 7. The end of page 6 is where the phases starts. There's a paragraph explaining that the sale is going on in phases, and I am sure you can remember that the properties were sold in phases.
Yep.
Okay, so phase 1, I'll just name or read out the names of the properties. Phase 1 has 14 properties, and the first one, actually the two, they in Hagan, number 78A and number 78B, Daniel Goddard Street, in bracket, Hagan Street. This is this report that was submitted in April shows that these properties have already been sold. Okay.
Mhm.
Now let me take you to page 4 of the final report of the ministerial task force, or interministerial task force rather. It says that 78A and 78B, Daniel Goddard Street, Hagan, should be reserved for government use.
Hmm.
That is the decision of the ministerial task force. At least that is what the final report says. Now, my issue here is by the time you submitted the report, the one you presented to cabinet, the property had already been sold, and your report was an update. Correct. And then now there's this final report that was submitted on the 28th of October 2020, the same year. Let me just confirm. Yes, 28th of October 2020, saying something different. And
Hmm.
now that is why in the beginning I had the question of what did your colleagues all sign this report to say that they all agree to the decisions that were made by the sales? Because now these two reports, most of the especially in Banjo, some of the properties do conflict with what was done and what was reported or recommended to cabinet.
Mhm. First, I cannot speak to the contents of the October 2020 final
Yes,
report.
but just
That's not,
to your report. Yes.
yes, all right. So I just want the record to be clear about that first. So I cannot speak to that. But secondly, there are email correspondences conveying to the receiver the list of properties that were to be sold in the different phases. And those email correspondences, because usually the instructions are given to the Director of Civil Litigation, Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Bigler, who was the main interlocutor at the ministry with the receiver. And so I will not be surprised if the receiver has an email correspondence from Mr. Binga informing him about the properties that were to be sold, because the receiver was informed of this list of properties. This was communicated to him for him to proceed with the sale. So the communication that the receiver received would have been very clear as to the properties that were to be sold. So, and that is what was reflected in the report in April, which was shared. As I said, you can see the email exchanges. It was shared with the other members of the ministerial task force, who actually commented on the report, and then the decision was taken after those comments and a final approval to share it with the Secretary to Cabinet for printing and signature. You're muted.
Sorry, I was saying that you did mention when you were answering to previous questions that you foresaw that updates would be given to Cabinet as time went on with regards to said properties.
Not
right?
just with regards to the said properties, but
Or
with
the
regards to
whole
the
outcome of the or the
exactly.
implementation of the recommendations and the white paper.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes. So is the report that you shared on the 23rd of April 2020 with Cabinet, is that the only update you prepared before you leaving the Ministry of Justice?
It was the first and only one that
Okay.
was prepared under my tenure.
Okay, that was the first one.
And only one under my tenure.
Okay. And I know you said that you've shared these reports, and of course I expect that all of your colleagues, ministers on the task force would also deliberate on the decisions or the sale of the properties being done.
It was in the course of deliberating on the properties when the decisions were made to identify which ones to sell at that point and which ones not to sell. So some were identified for sale, others were reserved for different reasons.
Okay. All right. I just want us to discuss third party claims quickly and we can move on to other issues. Like I said, I do not foresee this being a long session. How did the ministerial task force deal with the third party claims?
For the third party claims, I'll have to take you back a little and provide context and to that. Now, I'm taking you back to the proposal that I made for the government to adopt a transitional justice process.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there were a lot of grievances following the change of government in 2016. And our transitional justice process was introduced with three primary objectives in mind. To identify, because as a starting point, I wanted to address all grievances in the country, because from my experience working in a post-conflict society, and I'm sure experts in transitional justice will tell you this, the conflicts in post-dictatorship societies are mostly triggered by one word: grievance. If grievances are not addressed, then you are setting yourself up for potential conflict in a post-dictatorship society. And I had the fortunate experience working in a post-conflict society, which is why, again, I introduced transitional justice in the country following the change. And the objectives of that transitional justice process were mainly three: to first to identify the root cause of the grievances, second, to address the grievances, and third, to ensure that there will be no recurrence of the acts which cause the grievances. Now, of course, there were different categories of grievances, and which is why different mechanisms were put in place to address each category of grievances. That is why the TRRC was established to address those set of grievances that relate to violations of human rights. That is why the CRC was set up to address grievances with respect to constitutional order, governance, and the rule of law. And so the government, as I said, I wanted to address all grievances. Now, several individuals also, before, during, and after the Janneh Commission, petitioned the government to address grievances over land. And this included members of the former PPP government whose properties were confiscated by the state following the 1994 military takeover. And so, in short, and I think this file is still in the ministry, I instructed for a folder to be opened for claims by third parties over land. And to the best of my recollection, they were in these 5 broad categories. There were cases that were instituted before the courts. That's a category of the claimants. There were claimants who said that they were forced to sell their land by former President Jammeh. Third, there were claimants who said that their properties were deliberately undervalued through a judicial sale to enable President Jammeh acquire them dubiously. That's the third category of claimants. The fourth category of claimants over land were former members of the PPP government, and there were quite a few of them who submitted petitions reclaiming their properties. And of course, the claimants also identified by the Janneh Commission itself, and I will come to that soon. But there were claimants who the Janneh Commission identified in its report. So these were the 5 broad categories of claimants. Now, I would refer you to the Janneh Commission report, Volume 1. You have it before you, Council?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Janneh Commission report, Volume 1, page 8.
Okay.
Let's go to page 8. Let me see if I can. Okay. You with me?
I'm there.
Okay. Now, look at the...
Are you talking? Okay.
Sorry, what are you saying?
No, continue. It's fine.
Okay. Now, let me read what page 8 says for you. It says, now I cannot, I'm not good with IT, so I am struggling here. But just give me a minute.
If you can tell us the paragraph, I think that's easier. Or do you mean the whole page 8?
No, last paragraph. The
Of
paragraph
page
that
8.
starts with secondly. If you can just read that for the record, please.
All right. Secondly, the commissioners were made aware from the outset that the government was contemplating setting up another commission of inquiry to deal with the landed properties of private persons allegedly seized or dubiously acquired by the ex-president. The commission has, therefore, generally refrained from considering third-party claims to landed properties in order to avoid adjudicating between ex-president Jammeh, the government, and ordinary claimants. However, the commission has not shied away from identifying some claims that it considers lacking in merit and making definite findings on them.
Yeah.
Should I continue?
No, that's fine. Okay. That's fine. So you can see that the commission did acknowledge that it was made aware from the outset that the government was contemplating setting up another commission to look into landed properties of private persons.
Okay.
Are you with me?
I am.
Good. Now, the reason why the commission said so in its report, because right from the start, when we were discussing the terms of reference of this commission, the question arose as to whether the commission's mandate should include land claims by third parties. At the time, it was my anticipation that 5 commissions were going to be established. 5 main commissions were going to be established under the transitional justice process. The first one was the Janneh Commission, of course. Then you had the National Human Rights Commission, the Constitutional Review Commission, and the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission. And there was going to be a 5th one, which was the Commission of Inquiry that looks into land claims by third parties. Now, that decision was later changed. It was later changed for the following reasons. First, while we had set up the Janneh Commission and proceedings have started, and we were in the process of setting these other 4 commissions, and so we were doing them in turn. So I think next was the TRRC with the consultations, then the CRC, the National Human Commission. So then there was an intervening event, which was the Faraba Banta incident, when there were the unfortunate loss of life and the destruction of properties. And as a result of those disturbances, the government, or the president rather, instructed me to set up a commission of inquiry to look into the Faraba Banta disturbances. And this is a matter of public knowledge. We all know that the Faraba Banta Commission was established consequently. Now, that commission was unforeseen. It was not part of the plan. So it really created another commission of inquiry in this period where we were anticipating creating only 5 commissions of inquiry. So in the end, and I'll be honest here, we became commission fatigued because these commissions do cost money. I'm sure the National Assembly committee hearings that we are on now will cost money. But let alone these commissions of inquiry, where our approach was to make them totally independent by making sure that we get private individuals, etc. It was going to cost money. But we were also commission fatigued at that point. And so therefore, the idea to set up a special lands committee was abandoned. And I had to look for a cheaper, more efficient way to deal with these third-party claims. And the one way I thought we could do that was to use the establishment of this ministerial task force following the Janneh Commission recommendations for the government to implement. I proposed to the president, which is the letter that you have, where I wrote to the president to propose the establishment of this ministerial task force and to include 2 broad mandates. One was to oversee or supervise the sale of the assets as recommended by the Janneh Commission, and the other one was to deal with third-party claims. So if you look at the letter that was sent, it was expressly indicated that the ministerial task force should also be given the responsibility to deal with third-party claims. And this was approved by His Excellency the President through a response to that letter, which you also have, because I saw that while I was before the committee. So that is what created the mandate for the ministerial task force to deal with third-party claims. So I've just given you the history here, the background as to why it was the ministerial task force that was entrusted with this responsibility. But the initial idea was to set up another commission of inquiry to deal with third-party claims. As a result of the intervening Faraba Banta disturbances, another commission was established We thought there will be one too many commissions, and we were looking for a cheaper way to deal with this category of third-party claims or grievances. Hence, the mandate of the ministerial task force to deal with third-party claims.
Okay, that was very informative. But let me just ask or start with the third party claims. You mentioned that in addition to the ministerial task force considering it, a cheaper option was to direct or have a file opened at MOJ where all third party claimants can come and submit their applications or whatever documentation that they had. What was the outcome of this process for the third party claimants up until the time you left on the 30th of June 2020?
Well, what I said was a file was open to where the third party claims were filed, if you like.
Yes.
And so the file should be at the ministry. The file should be there. And so the ministerial task force was to go over these third-party claims and resolve them. And we decided to start with the most straightforward ones. Which were, if I recall correctly, the properties, the claims that were pending before the court. So we thought we should allow that process to continue until the end, and the ministerial task force will abide by the outcome, of the court's decisions in those cases. Second, there were claims of petitioners who wanted their properties to be returned because they believe it was undervalued and through a judicial sale, and that the former president, with the complicity of the sheriff's office, deliberately undervalued their properties to acquire same. And so we thought we can deal with those. And then there was the third category now. This is in the report. I think the third category was those who claim that the former president forcefully acquired their properties and forced them to sell it. And so those were the third category of claimants that we thought were the most straightforward. The other two were a little bit more complicated. But if you want, I can elaborate on the reason why they were more complicated.
Please do.
Okay. The other two categories were, the first of the two was the PPP claimants, those who were in the former Jawa government. If you recall, commissions of inquiries were established following the 1994 military takeover, and reports were submitted, and the government issued a white paper. But they felt that the commissions were unfair, etc. Arguments were made, and that their properties were unlawfully confiscated from them. And they had a case, I have to admit. They had a case simply because the report of the Commission of Inquiry that looked into those ministers in the former PPP government was nowhere to be found. We couldn't find it. We couldn't find the report at the Justice Ministry. We couldn't find the report at the Office of the President. I couldn't even find the report with the former ministers of justice who were in office at that time. I mean, if you ask me for the Jani Commission report, I can produce them as a former minister. I have kept them, but maybe perhaps we're blessed with a more digital age these days. But in those days, they had to work with hard paper. But yes, we couldn't find the report anywhere. And the claim was that that's only because the commission did not recommend for the forfeiture of those properties. And that's why the report disappeared. What we had was the white paper. And if you read the white paper, it was not very clear what the commission's recommendations were. So that white paper essentially just said we're confiscating these properties, but it doesn't say based on the commission's report. Now, I had started work on resolving on those third-party claims. I had actually personally called the chair of the Commission of Inquiry into the PPP Minister's Assets, Justice Bamfo, in Ghana. I obtained her number and I called her to see if she has a copy of the report that she could send to me, because at that time I was also coming under a lot of pressure from the former PPP ministers who were always following up on the state of their petitions. And so I had to really try to resolve those claims. So I contacted Justice Bamfo and I spoke with her in person, and she told me that first she will try to find the report. She has moved houses a few times since then. This was all the way back in 1994, 95. So it was a long time, and she will try to see if she could find it. But she also said this to me. She said she understood that when she left the Gambia, the conclusions of her report were doctored and changed. That's what she said to me over the phone. That she was informed that the conclusions of her commission were changed, doctored, if you like. That's the word she used, to satisfy the military government at the time. But that her conclusions were different from the final outcome. So I pleaded with her to keep on looking, for this report of the commission, which I really wanted to lay my hands on so that we can determine the way forward for this class of claimants. But more importantly as well, the findings of those commissions of inquiry were saved in the 1997 Constitution. And there was no way we could have interfered with those findings, which were saved under, I believe, the entrenched clauses in the 1997 Constitution, which was also part of the motivation why I really wanted a new constitution, because there were a lot of injustices that were saved in that 1997 Constitution, which really is antithetical to a modern and democratic state. So those findings were saved in the Constitution, and therefore it was a more complex exercise to resolve those third-party claims. So that's why we put those to the back burner pending the receipt of additional information, etc., before we can begin to think of resolving those third-party claims. And then, of course, the final category of third-party claims, I'm now, perhaps let me see if I can recall. Yes, the Janneh Commission claimants. The Janneh Commission did identify certain claimants, as you saw, and those claimants, their claims was also complex. It required more time because the Janneh Commission identified them specifically in its report and suggested that if another forum deal with those claims, and they identified those claims in the report. I can give you the specific reference of the report if you want it now, but yep, the Janneh Commission was of the view that those claims should be dealt with, and it basically involved compensation to those claimants, in fact all of them. So maybe here you can look at volume 3 of the Janneh Commission report. So volume 3, pages 7, page 274, page 287, 288, 289, and 292. These contain the recommendations of the Janneh Commission with respect to this category of third-party claimants. So these were the more complex case of claimants that I thought we can deal with later. Let's just get rid of the more straightforward claims, which is the first three that I mentioned earlier.
Yes, very well. I think I want us to be done with land. So anything land related that you can just explain to the committee. Let's deal with the, like you said, the more complicated ones.
Okay.
Yes, but I'm still interested in up until the 30th of June 2020. Apart from what is reflected in the update, was there any other thing that happened with the third party, with regards to the third party claims
I'm
at the
not
level of
sure.
MOJ?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Perhaps you can be
Yes,
more
you
direct.
know, the report you submitted to cabinet was in April.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. So what I'm saying that and you is that there's a 2 month period between the submission of the report and the time you left the Ministry of Justice as the AG.
Yes.
Yes, that's now my question is any other changes that took place within these 2 months with regards to the third party claims.
I mean, it's a very broad question, so my mind is going 1,000 different ways. I don't know until if there is something, just ask the direct question, cancel, and
No,
yeah.
there isn't something in particular that I am looking at. I just want to know whether there were any other claims that we received, what happened with those people.
These were the three categories of third party claims that the Ministerial Task Force dealt with while I was there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. With regards to third party claims, is there anything else you want to tell this committee that you haven't said?
Um,
Whether
well,
the more complicated ones or not?
the more complicated ones we didn't touch until I left.
Okay.
Those are still there. The three we resolved very quickly because it was a matter of deciding to leave the cases to proceed to the end. And of course, for the ones that were the subject of judicial sale, we decided to offer the claimants to, instead of returning the properties as they wanted, we decided to offer them the opportunity to buy back their properties at the price that the former president paid for those properties. And I think they affected three at the time when I was there. There were four claimants in this category. One was the Modu Pol family in Banjul. The other one was Babuka Somposise. The third one was the owners of Future Lek, and the fourth one was Ndemban Clinic, owned by, as I understood it, the Jack Fall family. So these were the four claimants, if I recall, in that third category. Sorry, in the second category. And then in the third category of those who said they were forced to sell their properties, there was one claimant, if I recall, the Ndu family in Bara. And I think there was another family in Bijilo. I mean, there were a few. I can't remember all of them now, but we dealt with these cases that we thought were more straightforward.
Okay. So for these ones that you just listed, I was going to come to them, but it's good that you have already listed them out. For these ones, some of them, or should I say most of them, the Commission of Inquiry had made recommendations about them. And in the white paper, I
Which ones?
will
Which ones?
let me take you to the white paper.
Okay.
Page 11 of the white paper,
Mm-hmm.
paragraph 25.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Page you,
Is that
you
on
have
this?
it, page 11, paragraph 25 of the white paper.
If it's not too long and not a bother for you,
No,
you can
no,
just
it's
read it.
not too long. I will read it out. Just give me a minute. Let me see whether the committee members are also on track. All right, let's continue. So, paragraph 25 says the government, however, rejects the recommendations of the Commission in respect to Ndeban Clinic, Central Abattoir, Farato Farms, Kanilai, Santang Sanyang, Banjolinding Farms, and Bara Coconut Plantation. So the two you mentioned are here. Let me just continue because the recommendations contained in pages 61 to 63 in respect of these properties were not part of the Commission's terms of reference.
Are you sure there were two? I only hear Ndemban Clinic, not the others.
Oh, Bara Coconut Plantation, the Ndur
No,
family's farm.
no, Bar Coconut Plantation belong to the third category, which is people who claim that their property was, the former president forced them to sell their properties against their will.
Yes, so what
Okay,
I
well,
mean by
okay,
two,
yes,
as in the list you
yes,
had given
yes.
of
No, no, I
third-party
understand.
claimants.
I
Yes.
understand now. Yes, so the two properties are
Yes,
there.
so
Yes.
just for those two ones. Now, my question here is the white paper rejected rather the Commission's recommendations because it is the belief of the government that the Commission did not have the mandate to get into those third-party claims.
Not to get into those third-party claims, but the
Yes.
specific nature of the recommendations made. And I would like you to refresh my memory about because I can't remember now what the nature of
The
those
recommendation. Okay,
recommendations were.
let me
Yes,
just take you back to let me take you to the Commission's report.
yes.
For Bara, the
Mhm.
coconut plantation, the Commission said in page 63, paragraph 7, having regard to its close proximity to the sea, it is recommended that this property be rezoned for tourism purposes and sold for a tourism accommodation related project. The sum of $1 million being the purchase price paid for the property shall be credited to the ex-president's liabilities as a recovery of stolen assets. It is further recommended that any proceeds of sale shall be utilized to acquire adequate land to create a proper access to the property. That was
Yes.
the recommendation with regards to the coconut plantation in Barra. And then the ministerial task force decision was that the coconut plantation should be returned to its original owner, that is the Ndur family, at the price that the former president obtained it.
Maybe I need to clarify something here.
Okay.
There seems to be a confusion.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in office as part of the ministerial task force, the claim by the new family was not in the second category of claimants, that is claimants as a result of a judicial sale.
Okay.
The claim by the new family was that the former president forced them to sell their property. And as I said, there were other claimants in this category as well. But the committee, as far as I was concerned, you can sit in a committee, you can decide on an outcome, but you all have different motivations for the decision.
Mm-hmm.
That's why sometimes you have a court with the same judgment, but different or separate opinions, all supporting the same conclusion. So I can only speak for myself. So when I was there, the new family's claim was in the third category of claimants, which those who said that the former president forced them to sell their properties, and therefore they wanted the properties to be given back to them. At that point, the position was, well, in the absence of prima facie evidence, because we couldn't really burden claimants to show us evidence to a higher standard. We needed to understand the prevailing atmosphere at the time as well in the country, which is what the white paper actually also explicitly recognizes if you look at the preamble part or the introductory part of the white paper. But the Andu families claim that they were forced to sell their property was just that. It was a claim. And in the absence of prima facie evidence, no decision was made. We decided that since they didn't bring any prima facie evidence, we can't proceed with that. So when I was there, that was the decision of the ministerial task force. Now, obviously, the task force is dynamic. They can reconsider, they can review their decisions. If they determine that the new family deserves to be given an opportunity to buy back their property as a result of that claim, well, that's at the prerogative of the ministerial task force, which had a discretion to determine third-party claims. We have to remember that the discretion was there was a discussion. The ministerial committee task force had a discretion to determine third-party claims, and as you know, counsel, discussions are very broad. Unless you can demonstrate a high standard of unreasonableness, no one interferes with that discretion. So, like I said, when I was there, the decision was not taken to give the Ndu family back their property for the same price that the former president paid. It must have occurred after I left office. But in any event, I don't see a problem with it because, as I said, the ministerial committee had a discretion. Now, if you look at the commission's recommendations about proposing for the place to be used as a tourist resort, etc., we had to go back to the terms of reference of the commission and determine whether recommendations like that could reasonably be envisaged within the broad terms of reference. And we tried to be liberal in our interpretation of the terms of reference, and no matter how liberal we were, we couldn't reasonably encompass that recommendation within the terms of reference of the commission. So that's why the government said, we reject this because this was not part of your mandate. Your mandate was not to recommend the use of lands for resort, etc.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. There's another property that I had Ndeban Clinic.
Yes.
The use of Ndeban Clinic was made during your time. So the decision, rather, for the use of Ndeban Clinic by the recommendation of the commission is that it should be used by Ministry of Health. And was that decision also accepted by the ministerial task force during your time, or was it after?
It was during the decision on Ndeban Clinic was taken during my time. If you can just refer me to the specific recommendation of the commission on Ndeban Clinic, I would like to refresh my memory about that.
Okay, please hold on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so paragraph 26 of, sorry, not paragraph 26, rather, second paragraph of page 62 of volume 3 of the Janneh Commission's report. It says, the sum of $14 million, being the purchase price paid for the property, shall be credited to the ex-president's liabilities and recognized as a recovery of stolen assets. The property comprising the Ndeban Clinic shall be transferred to the Department of Medical Services and operated as a public health facility. The lease K246/1994 shall be cancelled by the Ministry of Lands and the land reverted to the state as part of the lands reserved for health services of the Gambia. So reserved for the health services of the Gambia.
Yeah. And that is what the
That
ministerial.
was, yes, that was the, no. I'm reading from the report of the Commission of Inquiry.
Yes, indeed, I
Yes.
understand.
Okay.
Yes, and that
Now,
is.
sorry, let me just say this before you answer, so you can just provide the answer together. Paragraph 25, like I read out of the white paper, rejects the recommendation of the Jana Commission with regards
Which
to the ban.
included Ndemban Clinic.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's an interesting point because as far as I could recall, it can only be explained by these circumstances.
Mhm.
And Ndemban Clinic was, the family of Ndemban Clinic was amongst the petitioners
Okay.
that the former president really undervalued their property and bought it through a judicial dubiously to it was subject to judicial sale, and it was one of those properties that the former president acquired dubiously by deliberately undervaluing or acquiring the property at an undervalued price. So I believe the reason why the government in its white paper rejected that recommendation was to also give the owners the opportunity to buy back their property, since the claim was that their property was deliberately undervalued by a complicity between the former president and the sheriff's division. Right now, the ministerial task force ultimately departed from that decision, and I believe went back and agreed with the commission's recommendations, because another intervening act took place: the arrival of COVID. The coronavirus was a factor that I think led the ministerial committee to now move away from giving the Jack Fall family the opportunity to buy back their property. They were the only ones actually who unfortunately were affected by that decision in the reverse, because all the others benefited. They were also going to benefit from the same because they had petitioned, and I recall one of his brothers, who I knew very well, was constantly in my office following up on their petition. And I think we were going to give them the opportunity until COVID came. So when coronavirus came, the government decided that the Ndemban clinic in Bakau was suitable to basically handle COVID patients. And hence the whole history behind the use of that facility during COVID, when it was rehabilitated and people with COVID were admitted at the Ndeman Clinic to deal with COVID. So the COVID was the reason why the government decided to keep the property and in essence followed the recommendations of the commission.
Okay. All right. Maybe just for the record, let me just read out the updates that you had submitted to cabinet with regards to the banking.
Sorry,
It
say that
says,
again.
I said maybe just for the record, let me just read out the part of the updates to cabinet with regards to the clinic.
Are you reading from the final report or from the
No, from
submission?
the 23rd of April report.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Yes, it says the ministerial task force has also endorsed cabinet's decision to build a children's hospital at Deban Clinic. Meanwhile, the premises could be used temporarily by the Ministry of Health as part of the preparations for the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that just confirmed what I have just said now.
Yes. Just to say that for the record.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So I think there were other properties that was it third parties that were also returned to them at the price that the former president obtained them. Can you recall any other properties apart from the few that you have listed?
Outside the category that I have mentioned on judicial sale?
Yes.
As far as I recall, like I said, there were 4 petitioners, including the Ndeman Clinic, and
Yes.
those were reversed later, and that leaves outstanding the 3 other petitioners, which is Abubacarr Somposise, the owners of FutureLec, and the Modupol family. Those were the other 3 that were outstanding as far as I was concerned.
For FutureLec, what was the ministerial task force decision? Because it was still in court at the time. Was it after the report? They had taken their claim to court.
Yes, FutureLec did take their claim to court, but at the same time, they did petition through their lawyers for a return of the property, because the former president again undervalued the property through a judicial sale. So they also were part of the petitioners, and they were given the opportunity to buy back that property at the same price that the former president acquired it.
But unfortunately, were they able to make the payments?
Up until the time I left, I do not recall that.
Okay, but they were given the opportunity to buy back the property.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, that's fine. I think that on this issue of third-party claims, I think this is fine. But you said you had, at your instructions, a file was opened.
Absolutely. A file was opened where all the petitions for third-party claims over land were put, because as I said, the idea was to set up another commission of inquiry to look into these third-party claims over land.
All right. So the reason I'm saying at your instructions, did you ever confirm after you had given instructions whether said file was opened?
No, I cancel. I mean, as a minister, when you give your instructions, especially over matters that are not urgent, you assume that it will be carried out, and then when the time comes to look at those matters, then you can ask for the file and then start working on it.
But the ministerial task force was also looking at these third-party claims.
They were looking at them in phases, not all at the same time. So that's why I said we looked at the first 3 most straightforward ones, and then left the other 2, which were more complex, for a later time.
Okay. Sorry, you mentioned that FutureLec did get in touch with the ministry, or was it the task force they got in touch with regards to, through their lawyer, about their property for the petition?
I cannot recall who the letter was addressed to, but I certainly recall seeing a letter from FutureLec asking for them to be given the opportunity, something along those lines. I don't recall whether the ministry was CC'd or it was the addressee. I can't recall that, but there was a written communication.
Okay. And lastly, can you recall who their lawyer was? The lawyer that was submitted the petition rather on their behalf.
If I am not mistaken, it was Ami Bensouda and Co.
Very well. Let's move on. There were rental properties, or there were properties that had offices and different in commercial complexes that were being rented out, as identified by the commission.
Yes.
Prior to the commission, they were being rented out by KFF, that is the Kanilai Family Farms, and up till to this day, there's a property still being rented out, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Were you aware of this at the time?
Of properties being rented?
Yes, particularly, or the most, I don't want to say, the most dominant ones were the complex in Swama,
Mm-hmm.
and then the 2 complexes along Kara Avenue.
In fact, it was the very reason why, when I was instructed to freeze the assets of the former president, I didn't choose the option of a blanket freeze. I chose the option of a freeze with a receiver, so that those businesses that were going on would continue under a receivership, and that those who were employed in those businesses will not lose their employment as a result. So I was very much aware of the of those going concerns.
Okay. And up until 30th of June 2020, these properties were still under the receivership.
I believe the properties were transferred from one receiver to the other.
Yes, I mean, but still under receivership.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. All right. Now, I would want us to complete the land issues. I also mentioned about that we will talk about the TDA, because we did say that the ministerial task force did not go in such categories, did not deal with the land as provincial land or TDA land or leasehold land or freehold land.
Yes, we if I recall very well, we just went through the list of the properties that were identified in the Jani Commission report in the order that they were identified.
Okay. Now, the sale of land, the sale process for land, we discussed how it was by a public auction the last time that you appeared before the committee, and how the receiver and the SG would review the bids that were submitted on different occasions. Now, there's something that stands out if you take a look at the sale. If you look at the sale process, is the Solicitor General being the one representing the government in the sale process. If you take a look at, I don't know whether you see the copies of the assignments for these properties that were prepared, but the Solicitor General is the one that sold on behalf of the government. Do you catch the drift here?
First, I have never seen any of those assignments.
Okay.
But secondly, I think it would be a misreading of the situation to say that it was the Solicitor General that was selling. The Solicitor General was executing assignments on behalf of the government in this process, which was basically sui generis. It was not your ordinary process of government transactions. And besides, I know you are also obsessed with the idea of government selling land. I think we have had our back and forth on this, but this was a specific recommendation by a commission of inquiry. Now, imagine if the commission says government should sell the land and you saying government cannot sell land, then the commission was in the first place wrong to have made that recommendation, and two, even if it was right, and then who would have been, whose responsibility would it have been to sell the land if the recommendation was directed at the government? So I think there's a little bit of misreading of the room here. But in any event, the Solicitor General was not selling land. It was the government that was selling land. Don't forget that Cabinet is the highest decision-making body in the executive. It comprises the president and ministers, and they followed the recommendations of a constitutionally established commission of inquiry, which recommended for the government to sell these lands. The government accepted those recommendations and instituted a task force to oversee the sale of the land. Now, whatever mechanisms were put in place to give legal effect to those sales, that is what the government adopted at the time, given that this was a sui generis process. So the Solicitor General was signing assignments as a party to the assignment, as one party to the assignment, but it was not the Solicitor General that was selling land. It was the government that was selling land.
All right, so let me just say this. I think saying that I am obsessed with government selling land is very wrong,
Okay.
and it's not something I expect from you. Secondly, when we question on why it is the Solicitor General selling land on behalf of the government, of course, the Solicitor General cannot sell state land on his own. Whoever the Solicitor General would be, it would be at the instructions or on behalf of the government of the Gambia. And of course, following a cabinet decision, like you said. But here, what we are looking into is the process, right? The mandate of the committee is to look into disposal, but also the process in which said disposal or sale of assets were done. That's it. That is what we're looking at. And the reason why I am asking about the Solicitor General being the one that executed the sale on behalf of the government is just that when it comes to government assets, one would expect that perhaps the Ministry of Finance would be involved in one way or the other. And now, the last time you appeared before this committee, you had explained the reason why the Minister of Finance was not present or was not a member of the interministerial task force that was looking into the assets or properties forfeited to the state by or on the recommendations of the Jana Commission. So now it is time for sale. So what is the explanation here that the Minister of Finance or the Ministry of Finance in general is not involved in the sale process?
Let me start with the first comment you made about you being obsessed with government selling land. That was said with a tinge of humor, Council. And I think you have made similar comments to me when I appeared before the National Assembly on some issues, and I took it in the way that it was conveyed, basically in light mode. So that was said with humor, if you like. Certainly, it's nothing to be obsessed about in reality. But secondly, to answer your point head on, if I were to be asked whether in this set of circumstances the Solicitor General could have executed assignments on behalf of the government, I would, in the present context, say yes. You see, the Ministry of Finance was involved in the process, of course, at the level of the Permanent Secretary. The Permanent Secretary was a member of the technical committee, and so they were very much involved in it. Now, as I said, own professional opinion, the Minister of Finance, there's no doubt, is responsible for government assets. But government assets acquired in the ordinary course of government business, assets acquired for the purpose of government business. This is an assets recovery process. That means until the government determines the fate of the assets one way or the other. So, for instance, if the government decided to keep the assets for government use, then it becomes the responsibility of the Ministry of Finance as part of government assets, therefore. But so long as the process was to recover assets, it becomes a joint, as it is the case everywhere around the world. It becomes a joint Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Finance exercise. And in my view, either could have executed the sales on behalf of the government, either the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Justice, in this case, the permanent secretaries, either at Finance or the Solicitor General at Justice. Either would have been fine. Perhaps it was a matter of convenience, and of course, the involvement of the Solicitor General as the administrative head of the ministry, who was involved in the opening of the bids, etc. Maybe that was why that option was taken out of convenience. And since the Ministry of Justice was the main interlocutor in this process with the receiver, I think it was a matter of convenience, so that we will have one government department that will deal with the receiver in this case. As I said, it was a sui generis process, meaning it was a special process that was extraordinary and not the ordinary usual government business. That would be my view.
Okay. And do you think the SG, or the SG being the one executing these, the sale rather for the government, or on behalf of the government, is in some way caused delays when it came to final execution of the deeds registration, or even for these buyers, right? Be it government entities or agencies or private individuals or companies. If to this date the receiver has testified, and from evidence gathered from MOJ, and even for some of these buyers, is that there's a difficulty in getting their documents. Some had bought from the first phase, and it's hard for them to get the final. Some have not even received a copy of a deed signed by the SG. Can you provide an explanation to this committee as to why such a delay exists or is still subsisting?
Council, you're asking me something that I will struggle to respond. I know, as a matter of general practice, government processes are slow. I know if you want to lease a document in government, at least in the past, it will take you a number of years to get your document leased. That's simply because of the system that has been in place in the country. I don't think we can attribute the delay to the SG's role at all. Far from it. I think the SG, notwithstanding his very busy schedule at that time, would discharge his responsibilities within a reasonable time. And for something as important as this, I doubt if the delay would have emanated from his end. In any event, I think there was a whole process involving several ministries, especially the Ministry of Lands, and I think perhaps this committee can interrogate further and see where the delay was coming from most of the time. I doubt if it will be from the Justice Ministry. That would be my response.
Sorry about that. Okay. That's fine. Did you, or the ministerial task force here, did the ministerial task force ever have any deliberations? I know you said you did not deal with specific land in specific locations, but in general, any ever discuss the land within the TDA?
Not
Considering, okay,
Yeah.
please
Go
continue.
ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so considering for TDA, there's a lease to GT board, right? And then GT board subleases. So has there ever been any deliberations on, even in phases, that let us deal with these phases, this first phase that we're at, and eventually we will get to what would be now government's next steps with regards to the land within the TDA?
No, the ministerial task force never specifically dealt with land in the TDA for the following reasons.
Okay.
Even before the Janneh Commission concluded its work, the government had cancelled the leases held by former President Jammeh to land in the TDA area, and the land had reverted back to the state at that point. So as far as the government was concerned, the TDA lands, the leases of which were cancelled, were no longer the subject of discussions as to what to do, because the government had at that point already taking back the TDA lands. So the ministerial committee had no mandate as such to discuss or decide on those TDA lands.
Okay, so the lease, all the leases for, was this a generic thing that was done, or did the government um, or cancel every single lease that the former president had?
There were a list of leases that I was given
Okay.
for the Ministry of Justice to unfreeze the land within those leases. I don't recall now whether it comprised all of the land within the TDA area, but I know that there were certain parts of the TDA area which were the subject of these leases which were cancelled, as a result of which we went to court to unfreeze the initial freezing order.
Okay. You stated a list I was given. Who provided said list for you?
I believe it must have been either the Ministry of Tourism or the Ministry of Lands. But again, this was a government policy decision at the time in cabinet to unfreeze the TDA land for certain purposes.
Of course, if cabinet is discussing and making a decision about this, you would most likely be present.
Absolutely, I was present.
Okay, and now my question is, considering the land was already frozen by the court, the commission is also doing its investigations with regards to assets obtained by the former president, right? Um, was this ever discussed, the fact that the commission might have to look into said properties, and then eventually also that the court order was subsisting? The court order would be easier to deal with, in my opinion, here, because the list, like you said, was provided and you can go to the court and make an application for them to be unfrozen. But then the commission was, on the other hand, investigating all assets that were related to the president or his associates.
I'm glad you asked this question because there is a certain misconception that I think I can help clarify here.
Okay.
When the initial decision was made to freeze all of Jammeh's assets, including land in the TDA area, it was not premised only on the Commission of Inquiry, on the Janneh Commission, in short. That was not the only premise. If you look at the application and the Anti-Money Laundering Act, it premises the freezing order or the restraining order on the investigations initiated by the Attorney General. Now, those investigations included the Commission of Inquiry that the President established under the Constitution, but was not limited to that only, because the Attorney General's investigations extended beyond the borders of the Gambia. So, as I said when I appeared before the committee, we were making contact with foreign governments outside the country, in Senegal, in Morocco, in Switzerland, in the UK, in Dubai, in several places in the US, to try to trace the former president's assets. And so therefore, it doesn't complete the picture if the assumption is made that the Janneh Commission was the only investigation that was envisaged under the freezing order. And it was therefore the reason why the government decided, and I agreed as the Attorney General at the time, that if we were to wait for all these other investigations to complete, perhaps the government will never be able to unfreeze these TDA lands. And in any event, there was good cause why the TDA lands could be unfrozen, because the conditions of the lease were not met in the first place. And this was the advice we received from the Ministry of Lands, as a result of which the freezing order was varied by application of the Ministry of Justice.
Okay. And can you remember when this decision was made to have the TDA land unfrozen, and when subsequently the court set aside? not set aside its order or varied its order?
It was certainly in 2017 when I was instructed by cabinet to seek a variation of the freezing order. We went to court. The High Court rejected the application, again on the basis that the Jani Commission has not completed its work. But it was, of course, as far as we were concerned, the wrong assumption, because again, the perception was that the only investigation that was going on was the Jani Commission, and therefore the freezing order could or could not be varied as a result of that ongoing process. But that was not the case. In any event, we went back to the drawing board. We looked at the other options that we had. We were able to gather new facts, which led us to submit a new, fresh application before the High Court, which was assigned to another High Court judge. And this time we succeeded in getting the freezing order lifted over the TDA lands.
Okay. So subsequently, when the order was lifted or varied, was that also in 2017 or in 2018?
I suspect it was in 27. Now I am 2018, probably 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's interesting. Very well. Okay. That
May I ask why that is interesting? Is there something that I need to know?
No. It's just a remark I was making.
Okay.
Yes. That brings us, I believe, to the end of. That's just the question I had for TDA. That has been clarified. So there's another class of assets that we did not discuss the last time you appeared before this committee. And of course, for obvious reason, is the aircrafts. Yes, the commission in its report, volume 1. Let me refer you to the exact page. Let me know to avoid misquoting. Page 18. Page 18 of the report, the commission briefly discussed the airplanes. However, some were sold before the commission concluded its work. And my question now here is, was the Ministry of Justice ever informed about the sale process for aircraft during your time, between 2017 or the first sale took place in 2018? Between 2018 to 2020, when you left the Ministry of Justice, was there ever discussions about the sale of aircraft?
Yes, at cabinet, the issue of the sale of aircrafts was discussed, and my position at the time, and I have shared this position with this committee before, that as far as certain assets were concerned, so the vehicles, the luxury vehicles, the aircrafts, my advice to the Secretary General at the time, and I believe I might have also given a similar advice to the Minister of Finance at the time as well. I can't remember now, but certainly to the former late Secretary General, that any vehicles or the aircrafts which are found on state property must be presumed to be properties of the state until the contrary is proven. And because they are presumed to be properties of the state, the Ministry of Finance can deal with those properties as it would deal with assets owned by the government. And since evidence was not produced to the contrary, the presumption was established that the properties belong to the state. Now, how these properties were disposed of, etc., I don't know.
Okay, so as far as you know, this was as far as you're concerned, this is what you know about the sale of the aircraft.
That it was
Or the
discussed
aircraft in general. Yes.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. But in the sale process, the the Ministry of Justice was not contacted for any legal opinion or any advice or preparation of any transfer documents?
Well, I am assuming that the Minister of Finance dealt with it in the same way as it would deal with assets of the state. And in those
Okay.
cases, they don't consult the Ministry of Justice for anything. I'm not aware of any such consultations in the past.
Okay. You mentioned something with regards to vehicles, that any vehicle found within state property is to be assumed to be owned by the state.
It's to
Is
be
that true?
presumed to be owned by the state.
Presumed to.
Yes,
Okay, until otherwise is proven. Is that what you said?
exactly.
Okay. And so for luxury vehicles found at State House, in Banjul or Fajara or any other state-owned property, the presumption should be that it belongs to the state.
My presumption would be that they belong to the state. Yes.
Okay. All right. And then if, like you stated, that any asset that belongs to the state should be dealt with by the Ministry of Finance, and therefore, when it comes to aircrafts and vehicles, should also be dealt with by the Ministry of Finance in the way that they deal with state assets in general.
Yes, I
Okay.
am assuming that they have a discretion in the way that they dispose of those of state assets.
Very well. Let me just run this back. I want to hand over to the committee. You had listed 5 categories of third-party claims.
Mm-hmm.
I was writing them down when you were talking. You said the first one is the judicial sales.
Well, it's part of it, but not in that order.
Okay.
I think the first.
It's just the order I wrote it
Okay.
down. So let me just read it out, and you can correct me where I have made a mistake.
Okay.
So we have I have judicial sales. I have forceful obtaining of property by the president, the undervalued properties, and then we have the former members of the PPP government. And the 5th category I have is the properties identified by the Jana Commission.
Yes. So the judicial sale properties are the same as the undervalued properties.
Okay, all right. Then I must have missed one.
No, I counted 5.
You counted 5. I have counted 5, but you've told me that the judicial sales and the undervalued are the same.
Yes. So maybe I should just recap.
Let me say it. Yeah, please recap for me so I can write it down properly.
No problem. The first category are those cases that were pending in court. That's the one you're missing from your list.
Ah, okay.
Yes, the category
Cases
of claimants
pending
who have pending cases before the court.
And these ones, do you know, were they pending prior to the commission's investigations, or were these cases filed after? Because you know, you have like future, like the application started right after the AG obtained the freezing order.
Yes,
That's when the first application was filed.
Yes, I like I said, some of these claimants came before and during and after the Jani Commission. So which is why the government decided to set up, or this is why I anticipated for the government to set up a commission of inquiry into lands, because we were getting the petitions throughout. So even before the Jani Commission was established.
Okay. All right, that's it. I have the list now. All right, Honorable Chair. These are all the questions I have for the witness for the time being, and I'm handing him over to the committee for questions.
For the time being, you're not done with me yet.
You know, there might be issues that will come up from the committee that I would want clarification on.
I'm glad that you're laughing now. When I said you're obsessed with government land, you were not laughing then. So just take it in light humor, with light humor.
No, it's fine. We're now at an understanding.
Good.
Yes, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much.
I believe you're muted, Council.
Can you hear the chair?
No, I cannot hear the chair.
Yeah, he cannot hear you. Can you hear him now?
No.
Okay, just give us a minute, please.
Okay.
I hope you're hearing me now.
Yes, Honorable Sisi, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. So once more, we want to thank you for your appearance and for responding to our questions. Now, the members will ask you questions. I will start myself. Just one question. That is concerning the claimants you've mentioned. Did you have any claimants from the previous owners of Caraba Hotel?
I don't recall claimants from Caraba Hotel, but I know the commission made recommendations with respect to Caraba Hotel, which I believe the government accepted in its white paper.
Because from sources, the previous owners before President Jammeh took over was Baba Joe.
Okay.
Any knowledge about that?
Like I said, I know the commission dealt with Caraba Hotel exhaustively, I believe, very comprehensively, and the government accepted. Even though Caraba, I think, went to court, the owners of Caraba went to court, took the government to court lately. If I am not mistaken, they are is it the Harafi group that was the owners of Caraba? Was it?
No, it was President Jammeh sold it to Karafi.
Okay.
But
so that's the case.
It was claimed that he forcefully took it from Baba Joe.
Yeah, that's the case. Yeah, so the commission dealt with that comprehensively, and the government, I believe, accepted the recommendations. But then I think the owners went to court, the Karafi. That's why I remember the name.
Okay, thank you very much. At
Thank
this
you.
point, I would ask Honorable Ture, you will have a few questions.
Okay. I can go ahead. Thank you very much, Honorable Tambedou. If we recall, the first question of the council was about the report you submitted, which was not signed, but has no difference with the ones submitted by others. So my question is just to affirm that that report, you would accept that report to be the right one, the right report.
Thank you, Honorable Ture. I confirm that that report is authentic.
Okay.
It reflects accurately the decisions and deliberations of the ministerial task force, and the fact that, notwithstanding that it was not signed physically, the fact that there were email exchanges on that report shared with the other members of the task force who commented on the report suggested that it was basically unanimously adopted, and it was also presented as such in cabinet by the ministerial task force.
Okay. Thank you very much. My other question goes to the issue between Mamadi Kurang and the lead council, as well as the other commissioners. All of them said they cannot work with Mamadi Kurang. Did they come out? Did they mention any specific issue why they could not work with Mamadi Kurang?
I believe I had testified to these facts when I appeared in person before the committee. Okay. And what I recall, and this is based on my own recollection of the facts, when the issues were raised, I held meetings, separate meetings with Mr. Mamadi Kurang, with the lead counsel, and with the 3 commissioners. And I think the other witnesses have corroborated this fact. Now, from my own recollection, I did inquire whether the commissioners could continue working with him. And from what I recall, the answer was no. I believe one of the commissioners appeared before you and said said that was not the case. I guess that was her recollection. This was my recollection. But in any event, that's besides the point, whether the commissioners said they could work or could not work with Kurang was besides the point. I think in any professional setup where you have those kinds of exchanges between colleagues, they cross a line and it's difficult to get them to work together again. And this was made clear to me by lead counsel, and the commission had to continue its work. And so a decision was made at that point.
So from what I heard from you, it's like they did not mention any specific issue that causes the dispute.
Well, as they say, the straw that broke the camel's back, really, as far as I was concerned, was the letter that Mr. Kurang wrote making allegations against council. And I should underscore unsubstantiated allegations against council. And because those allegations were unsubstantiated, I think council decided that she could no longer work with Mr. Kurang in those circumstances. And it was a reasonable position to take. And those were the reasons that, as far as I knew, were brought before me.
Okay. Yes, okay, we can move on. Yes, when you also mentioned when the lands were unfreezed or unfrozen in the TDA, does that mean that those lands that were frozen were automatically have automatically gone under the control of the GT board?
That would be my assumption, yes, because they were land which reverted to the state, and the GT board, in accordance with the act, had a head lease, if you like.
Yeah. But you are not aware of any sale of land that was approved by the cabinet that are in the TDA during that period?
First, I don't think TDA lands are meant to be sold, whether by decree of cabinet or not. I think the act is very clear. It's land to be allocated for the promotion of tourism. And but in any event, I am not aware of any land that was sold, either by virtue of a cabinet decision or otherwise, in the TDA area.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Honorable.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, I would ask Honorable Saab to take the floor. Saab.
Thank you very much, Honorable Tambedou.
Thank
How
you,
are
Honorable.
you?
I am fine, thank you, Honorable.
It's been a while.
Indeed.
Yes, my question is about the unsigned report of the Ministerial Task Force. We have seen reports coming up from your other members, other colleagues who made mention that they have never seen or signed this report. Is that not risky?
I would be very concerned if any member of the ministerial task force said that they have never seen this report. But in any event, I have submitted to your investigators and counsel the email exchanges between myself and the other members of the ministerial task force sharing this report and inviting comments from them, some of which were made. And then I have also shared email exchanges where I submitted this report to the Secretary to Cabinet for him to disseminate and get the other ministerial task force members to sign before we submit same to Cabinet. And I can confirm to you that this report was submitted to Cabinet and read page by page with the approval of all the ministerial task force members. So I would be very surprised if any of them said they've never seen this report. But the emails are there. The emails can show that the reports were sent to them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tambedou. This is what they said, and then you are making it clear to us that they have seen it, though it was not signed, but they went through it and they put their inputs in it. That's correct.
The emails are there, absolutely. You can see the email trails and the exchanges.
However, with regards to the sales of properties, when it was about third parties, that was divided into three: the PPP regime, former PPP regime, and then those who claim to be forcefully sold, asked to forcefully sold their land, and those lands that were undervalued. When it comes to the land that were undervalued, who were the ones who were selling this land? Who sold this land to the former president? They undervalued these land properties. Who sold them to the former president?
It depended. You see, that was part of the complaints by these petitioners, because normally, Honorable, I believe you are a businessman. So if I explain these facts, you will understand. From my experience, and this is what their grievance was. When you are taking a loan from a bank, the bank values your property. Let's say the bank values your property for 10 million, and the bank gives you, they don't give you up to the value of the property because there is a risk element involved. So let's say the bank gives you 7 million, which is 70% of the value of the property. Now, if you default in your payment, the bank will go to court, obtain a court order and for execution of the judgment debt, and the sheriff's division will take over and sell the property, just for hypothetical purposes, for the value that it was that was attached to it. So let's say it sells the property for 10 million. So the sheriff, in principle, should give you back your should give the bank its 7 million and take out a cost or whatever it is. Say, let's say another 500,000, and the 2.5 million remaining is given back to you, right? Now, the complaint of this group of claimants was that that was not done. What the former president did was, the former president, in some cases, approached the bank directly, even though the sheriff was supposed to conduct a public auction of these properties and sell it to the highest bidder. But the former president, on some occasions, went directly to the bank, paid the outstanding amount only, and then took the property, irrespective of the higher value of the property that was placed, or went to the sheriff, paid the amount that was outstanding to the bank only, and then took the properties without necessarily paying for the full value of the property. And in which case, the remaining balance should have been given back to the owners. So this was the bone of their contention in this category of claimants. And as I said, the petitions are there. The Minister of Justice must have these files there.
So it's like the bank was selling, for example, the bank was selling based on the value of the property during the time you were taking the loan. So my concern here is, did he buy it, or were these properties sold at the price that they were being owed, or were they sold at the value of the property?
They were being sold, from my understanding, they were being sold at the value that was outstanding. So instead of that was outstanding. So if 5 million was outstanding, the former president paid 5 million and then took the property instead of the full value of the property at the time that it was being made a security for the loan.
So the banks should have been responsible. It's part of the deal. Because I give you my property as a bank, you value my property at this amount. Before you sell my property at the cost of what I owe you, I think the best thing should have been you sell it at my own value.
Yes, that's the right thing to do, and which is why, because the right thing was not done, the committee had to look into the justness of the case. You see, when you resolving third-party disputes, it's no longer about profit and loss. It's no longer about a winner or a loser. It's about what was just and fair. And I think the committee was guided by those principles of justness and fairness. And in fact, as a matter of fact, the approach that the committee took was not unusual in law. In law, there is what is called, I know this is not common in the Gambia because we don't have a lot of cases of mortgage, but in more perhaps advanced societies where mortgage is frequent, there is what's called the equitable right of redemption, where an owner of property that was repossessed by the bank is given the opportunity to pay the bank the outstanding balance and take back their property, sometimes even after an auction sale. Sometimes even after an auction sale. And so this is, I think, a solution, a resolution that the committee adopted, which I thought was reasonable.
Okay. So that only three men that you mentioned, they got barrier properties. That's Abubacarr Sompo, Future, and then Modupulo. They all got barrier properties on the amount that it was bought for.
I know Modupol and Abubacarr Sompo did. They were given the opportunity to pay the same amount that the former president paid. So it means twice the same amount was paid. One was paid by the former president and the other was paid by these people. So in any event, the state did not lose anything. Future, like up to the point that I left, had not made payment.
They hadn't made payment.
Up to the point that I left, they had not, yes.
And they were given a period to pay.
Indeed, they were given a period to pay. All of them were given periods to pay.
Honorable, you mentioned about the assets that belongs to the former president that were outside the Gambia. That you were doing inquiries about those assets.
Yes.
Does it include bank statements, banks that he was banking with outside the Gambia?
No, we were not able to lay our hands on any specific bank accounts because those were subject to privacy laws in those countries, and so we needed the assistance of those countries, and which is why during the last session of the National Assembly before I left office, I introduced a bill called Mutual Legal Assistance on Criminal Matters Bill. And the part of the reason why that bill was introduced was because we were running into difficulties obtaining information from other countries because this bill was not in place in the Gambia, and there was no agreements between the Gambia government and those foreign countries for mutual assistance. So that is why it was partly why I introduced the bill on mutual assistance in criminal matters to enable us obtain information like that in the future if we needed to.
But none of this thing happens.
Sorry?
I don't know if it happened. You didn't contact any country outside the Gambia about his account.
About bank accounts? Not that I remember. I think we did write to ask for information, any information that would be helpful to us regarding the assets of the former president in those countries. So the request for information would be very generic, all information, and I don't think we ever received bank accounts.
Well, during the process of the Janneh Commission, were there any sales of Janneh's property during the activities?
I'm so sorry. You were breaking, so I was missing parts of your question.
During the work of the commission, were there any sales of James properties during the commissions before they finalized the reports?
I don't think the government engaged in any sale of properties before the commission concluded its report. No, I don't recall that.
How about property that has been identified as Giant property? Do you have any knowledge of it? What about the properties around the TDA area? Especially example, Dengue.
Yes, those were not sold. Those were reverted to the state. Those were not sold. No, they were not sold. They were TDA lands which reverted to the state under the GT board's head lease. And so I don't think land in the TDA is meant to be sold.
They were not giving out.
Sorry, say that again. I'm missing parts
of your...
the
sales of the aircraft. The sales of the aircraft.
Yes.
Were they open tender or were they identified? Were they restricted tender?
Neither the Ministry of Justice nor I was involved in the sale of the aircrafts, and frankly enough, I do not know how those aircrafts were sold. That was the responsibility of the Ministry of Finance, I believe. I think they were working together with Gambia Civil Aviation Authority.
I don't know what went wrong, or what were what was the mandate of the ministry, or what did they do beyond that mandate while the General Commission was going on with regards to your ministry and the Ministry of Finance? Were you acting on their behalf or what?
Sorry, say that again. I missed part of your question.
The Ministry of Finance.
Yes.
Were you acting on their behalf? They are restricted to you, to your ministry, when it comes to the city sales?
Honorable, I'm really sorry. I cannot hear you.
My mic. Is it clear now?
I really cannot. I was hearing your colleagues very clearly, but I'm struggling to hear you.
Clear now?
No, it's still breaking. Maybe you can use one of your colleagues. Yes.
Yes, Honorable. Honorable.
Yes, I can hear you very clearly, but your colleague, Honorable Cisse's mic is on, so maybe he should mute as well. Maybe that can also help.
No, I'm using his.
Okay. I can hear you clearly. Okay, I can hear you clearly.
Hello, Honorable. You hearing me now?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Yes.
My question is about this between you and the Minister of Finance. Were you acting outside your mandate when it comes to the sales of these properties?
Which properties?
When you were conducting the sales, you said the aircraft were the responsibility of the Minister of Finance.
Yes.
All the responsibility were for the Minister of Finance, and you were acting upon those actions.
No, the government established this ministerial task force. This again was a special process, and I have explained when I was answering the question from council that this was a sui generis process, and as far as we were concerned, our view was that until the assets were retained for government use, then they become the subject of oversight by the Ministry of Finance. But this was an assets recovery process, and the government had the liberty to engage in the process that it thought most efficient to carry out the recommendations of the Janneh Commission. So it was the government that established the ministerial committee, and this is contained in the white paper that the government issued following the report of the Janneh Commission.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think this is all I have for you.
Thank you, Honorable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Tambedou.
Thank you, Honorable.
Hello, Tambedou, are you hearing me?
Yes, I can hear you, Honorable. I can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think it's from my side. Let me just put on my headset. If not, I can't hear you properly. Okay. I can hear you now, Mr. Tambedou.
Thank you.
Yes, I think I just have like 3 questions for you. One will be the issue of the receiver with regards to his appointment. And then we've realized that through the documentation we've received that the Ministry of Finance was not involved in the appointment of the receiver. So can you enlighten this committee as to why that was the reason?
Yes, the Ministry of Finance was not involved because the Ministry of Finance was not involved in the appointment of the previous receiver. I think in the same way that the commissioners and the 3 commissioners and the secretary were identified to the president, the same way that lead counsel was identified to the commission, the same way that the 2 receivers were identified to the High Court and the Ministerial Task Force. So the Janneh Commission recommended for the replacement of the receiver. In fact, on one occasion, with respect to the 2 hotels, the Janneh Commission made a specific recommendation that the Attorney General should appoint another receiver to replace Augustus Pong. So based on all those considerations, that is why the receiver was appointed by the Attorney General with the approval of the Ministerial Task Force. Hello?
Asking this. Hello, I'm hearing you. I said the main reason I am asking this question is premised on the fact that the responsibility of the receiver will be to dispose of government assets. This will be the landed properties that have been, in one way or the other, taken or claimed by the government from the former heads of state. And when it comes to issues of government assets, be it in the form of retaining them or disposing them, the Minister of Finance plays a crucial part. That is in accordance to the Public Finance Act.
Now,
so
let me explain. Perhaps you missed this part when I was testifying in passing. The Minister of Finance was recused from the entire deliberation process of the government following the Janneh Commission report for reasons that are, I think, contained in the Janneh Commission report. And so even when Cabinet was deliberating on the white paper, the minister had to recuse himself from this process. And that is why in the appointment of the receiver by the ministerial task force, the Minister of Finance could not participate in that because he was not a member of the ministerial task force. In fact, if you look at the letter that I wrote to the president proposing the establishment of the task force, I had included the Minister of Finance in that letter. It was subsequently that my attention was drawn to the fact that this could amount to an awkward situation or potential conflict, because he was a subject of the commission's report and he was a subject of the government's action against him, which is why he was not part of the ministerial task force, which is why his permanent secretary was in the technical committee. And that explains why the Minister of Finance was not as such part of the decision-making process at the ministerial task force.
Thank you for that clarification. But my point here is the minister was, I can say, the head of the institution, but we are talking about the ministry here. So perhaps when he is conflicted, he can recuse himself, but that should not in any way effectively result to the entire ministry being absent from the ministerial task force. The minister was an individual. Of course, he was the head of the institution. He was the policy maker. But if he is conflicted, that shouldn't stop someone else to act on his stead. Like in the commission itself, the lead counsel happened to be conflicted in certain instances. And she indicated that when those instances come, what she would do is inform the commission, inform the attorney general, and then in one instance, we've even seen a private counsel being hired. So my question is premised on the fact that the ministry is diverse.
Yes.
And its involvement in that particular area was an imperative. So I find it very hard to understand why should, the absence of the ministry be based on the fact that the minister was conflicted when someone else could have been used.
You are right to make this very pertinent observation. My response would be this. The ministry was represented at the level of the technical committee, because the permanent secretary, who is now the governor of the central bank, was a member of this technical committee, and I think he had appeared before this committee a couple of days ago. Now, secondly, Honorable, this is a ministerial task force. It's at the level, you can call it a cabinet subcommittee. Now, the permanent secretary is not a member of cabinet, and this ministerial task force constitutes members of cabinet only. So they were acting for cabinet, on behalf of cabinet, because you can't have the whole of cabinet preside over this process. And that is why the president, in his wisdom, identified the ministries based on the locations of the properties in the Journey Commission report, identified these ministries to be to constitute this ministerial task force. Only ministers were members of this task force because they were, if you like, a cabinet subcommittee. And if we have a situation where one minister cannot participate in this process for one reason or another, well, that is the situation. We cannot then bring the permanent secretary from the level of the technical committee into a cabinet ministerial task force when really he is not a member of cabinet. I hope you understand the difficulty.
I do very well, but perhaps with more clarity. The main reason I'm stressing on this point is trying to look at the process itself, because the involvement of the Minister of Finance would have ensured to some degree that there will be adherence to the principles and provisions of the Public Finance Act. And we did ask the question whether they were even privy to the contract that was between the receiver and the Ministry of Finance. But to our surprise, the Minister of Finance cannot make that one available to the committee. And they are saying in their records they do not have it.
Yes, and well, the fact remains that the appointment of Augustus Pom was based on certain conditions. Example, it was for an initial 6-month period in accordance with the Anti-Money Laundering Act, and it was for at a certain rate. when Alpha Bay was appointed to replace Augustus Pom, it was the same conditions that was attached. It was for an initial 6 months period, also subject to renewal and at the same rate. So really, in this case, what happened was the name of one receiver was substituted for the name of another. And as I said, the government decided that the Minister of Finance at the time, given the situation, could not really participate in this process in order to preserve the integrity of the proceedings. But the permanent secretary certainly was part of it, and this was a permanent secretary who was the administrative head of the Ministry of Finance. So I think the government, particularly the Ministerial Task Force, had the liberty to consult the Ministry of Finance if there were any issues that it wanted to deal with. But I believe we were of the view that these were straightforward matters, and up until this point, no one had ever raised questions about the process at all. I believe the process was transparent as it could have been, and the Ministerial Task Force reported to Cabinet the process.
Yes, the main reason this is of interest to me is premised on two facts. One, if you look at the report that is being disseminated even widely, let's say the report of the landed properties which the receiver Alpha Capital really distributed, in front of this committee, he admitted to the fact that it was erroneous. And in fact, the total values that were reported in that particular report with respect to the sums that were received, when he was challenged on this committee by my humble self, the following day he came and admitted that they were erroneous. So perhaps if at all the Minister of Finance was involved, pursuant to the Public Finance Act, they would have served as the control to ensure that these reports will be passed to them. They will not only check them with regards to the arithmetical correctness of everything that was done, but they will ensure that everything that happens is in accordance with the provisions of the Public Finance Act.
I agree with you, Honorable, which is the reason why, as I said, the Minister of Finance was initially included in the Ministerial Task Force in my letter proposing the establishment of this task force. But for the reasons that I have given you, and in order to preserve the integrity of the process, the minister himself was recused, but his permanent secretary was part of the technical team. And in any event, the added protection of audit, it was clear that the process was going to be audited. And if there were any errors at that point, those errors will be identified and appropriately addressed. So it was not a question of whether an error would go unnoticed to eternity. I think it was only a matter of time for an error to be observed. I'm glad that you were able to observe those errors early on. But you're right, if the Ministry of Finance was involved, because these are technical matters, I'm not sure even the minister's presence would have made a difference, because this required say certain expertise in a field to identify, to spot these errors. In your case, you did. But I'm not sure whether the minister could have, at that point, at that level, which was only dealing with policy, identified these errors.
Yeah, the issue is he would have assigned his staff, because even if you look at the issue of lodgement, that money is collected on behalf of the government in respect of the disposal of these assets, and then first they must pass through a transition account, which will be obviously the account of the receiver. There are provisions governing that one as well. So I don't know whether those ones were captured in the contract itself, and how does the contract deal with the retention period? How long should this particular receiver keep this money into his account before remitting them into the accounts of the central government?
These are also very valid questions, but like I said, the issue was we were caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, if you like. On one hand, the Minister of Finance should have been part of it. On the other hand, we are looking at the integrity of the process. And given the situation at that time, the decision was made by the government to recuse the Minister of Finance as at that point.
Okay, I think the last two questions will be those properties that were returned to their original owners as a result of judicial sales, and the owners of those properties were asked to come and then they can buy back their land at the price that was paid by the ex-president. I mean, I don't know whether they were treated in different categories or not.
I believe I have explained the whole genesis of the third-party claims and what the government, what I envisage to occur in terms of establishing another commission of inquiry to look into lands, and what torpedoed that whole idea, which the Farababanta Commission, which made it 5 commissions. So we were almost commission fatigue, as I said. But so the commission, the Ministerial Committee had to deal with these third-party claims. And I have explained here the different categories of third-party claims. And there were 3. And our objective was to resolve these claims, because that is why the commission itself, if you look at the commission's report, and I have referenced the pages of the commission's report where it says these matters should be dealt with by another forum, should be dealt with by another forum. But in addition to what the commission had identified and recommended, there were these other claims that were coming into the ministry before, during, and after the commission's proceedings. So something had to be done with these claims. And we decided that in the category of people who claim that their properties were undervalued through the judicial sale, the best approach to resolve this, because at the end of the day, again, Honorable, it's not about profit and loss when you're resolving claims. It's about a just and fair outcome. What would be just, what would be fair in light of the circumstances of this category of claimants. And the decision was made that if the former president had paid for the properties at that price, it's only fair because the claimants were claiming for a full return of their properties, because the properties were sold below the value that the banks took to give out the loans. And you're a businessman as well, I believe, so you understand how loans work. And if they believe that their properties were not sold at the value that the bank had taken them, then obviously they were basically short-changed. And so the ministerial committee decided in its wisdom that the state was not going to lose anyway. The former president has paid an amount. If the claimants match that same amount, it means twice that amount has been paid. Then we will give them the opportunity to buy back this property. And as I said, this is also grounded in law. There is a doctrine in law called the right of resumption. And it's similar to this situation where people whose lands are sold even after an auction can be given the opportunity to buy back these properties at the price that that was outstanding with the bank. So this is not an unusual resolution, if you like.
Yes, I will take you on that again, because the committee is finding it hard to reconcile, and then your submission will go a great deal in trying to clarify that, because it's good that you've mentioned the bank, because this particular instance that we are looking at, what the committee found out was, indeed, the president didn't buy it from that individual. The president bought it from the bank.
Yes.
The person in question defaulted in the payment of his loans. And then they went to court. The sheriff was asked to sell it, and the former president bought it through the judicial sales. So now the issue of the committee is not whether the individual have the right to buy back the land or not, but why was it not open to the general public? Since this was not a forceful acquisition, since he naturally defaulted in the payment of the loan that was due to the bank, and the issue was subjected to a judicial proceeding and a ruling was made. And if at all the former president didn't buy it, it is the view of the committee that someone else would have bought it. So if at all someone else bought it, then would it be returned to the original owner in the same fashion?
good question. I'm glad you are raising these questions because I think clarity is important. Now, let's assume for a minute that the sheriff was conducting the sale of these properties. The properties would not have been sold at the outstanding amount still with the bank. It would have been sold at the price of the property when it was valued by the bank. And what happened in this case, according to this class of petitioners, was that their property was not sold at the value that the bank had. It was sold at what was outstanding. So I have given this example before. Let me say it again. It's not harm to repeat this. If the property was valued at 10 million, honorable, right? And the loan was 7 million, and the owner defaulted, and the court gave an order for the sheriff to sell. So at that point, in fact, only the sheriff can sell the property because the order was given for the sheriff to execute the sale. Now, if the sheriff is selling the property at the value that it was made with the bank at 10 million, but the outstanding amount with the bank is 7 million, and somebody goes to the bank and say, I'll pay you 7 million so I can get this property. Now, what happened to the remaining 3 million in the value of the property? So the owner would have lost their property by a value of 3 million. And we thought that was unfair, and that's why we gave the owners the opportunity to buy back the property within a time frame, and if they fail to do so, the property would be sold by public auction, which is, I think, what happened in the case of FutureLeg. FutureLeg was, the owners of FutureLeg were given the opportunity to buy back. I don't think they did so, and the property was subsequently sold, even though I was not there when it was sold, but I'm aware that it was sold because I'm following partly some of the proceedings here. So the question again, Honorable, is not what would have been, your approach is reasonable, but you can have more than one reasonable options in any given situation. It's a question of which one would you prefer at any point in time, using your best judgment, and what would be your objective at that point in time. The objective of the committee was to resolve these third-party claims in a way that was fair and just for all the parties, so that everybody goes away with something.
Is the ministerial committee in a position to provide those documents which will prove that the value at which those properties were taken as collateral by the bank were over and above the values at which they were even sold to the president? If we can have those documentations, that will help us to really get into the mind of the ministerial committee and make a conclusion on it.
Yeah, the petitions are there to start with. The petitions must be in a folder at the Ministry of Justice. And of course, you can go further. You can contact the Sheriff's Office for them to provide you with the dossiers on those files. I can tell you one thing, though, that because of the manner in which these properties were dealt with, you will not find a lot of recording of these processes in the Sheriff's Division, because the sheriffs were supposed to conduct the sale at that time. The fact that they actually did not, and they allowed the process to be circumvented by former president going straight to the bank and clearing the outstanding loan in return for the property, which was below the full value of the property. I doubt if you will find any recording, but you are at liberty to contact the Sheriff's Office, as I said, in addition to the petition which contains the facts of these claims.
Yeah, because it will be very important to get those documentation, because listening to you now, we understand that the decision of the ministerial task force was based on the fact that these properties were undervalued.
Yes,
the values at which they were sold were way below the value at which the banks took them as collateral.
Absolutely.
So
And
if the committee will be definitely interested to have those documentation, then that will help us to reconcile whatever gaps we feel do exist between the values and the disposal price that was. So, Chairman, Honorable Chair, I want to make an application that the committee contacts the Ministry of Justice and the Ministerial Task Force to send us the file of the sheriff with regards to the sales of those properties, and equally the Ministerial Task Force. Honorable Tambedou, thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Fofana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Legal, we are done from our end. Any follow-up questions?
No more questions, Honorable Chair.
And is Mr. Tambedou free now to go?
Yes, for today.
Mr. Chair, I would like, with your permission, I would like to say a few things before I am discharged.
Go ahead.
Thank you, and I crave your indulgence. Mr. Chair, many things have been said about me and the Jame assets for far too long. Most of them were lies and fabrications. When I was invited to return home to serve at great personal sacrifice, I did so out of love for country. I did not sign up for this calumny. In honor of my oath of office as Attorney General, I suffered in silence as my name was dragged through the mud for years. Those who knew the truth opted to stay silent out of political convenience. I assembled some of the most qualified and competent professionals in our country to handle our transitional justice process. Their results speak for themselves. It is unfortunate that even some of them were also made the subject of false accusations and fabrications. And that is why I welcome this inquiry, so that all the facts could be presented to the Gambian public. I hope that it is now clear that when it comes to the sale or disposal of the Jame assets, hello, Mr. Chair, can you hear me? Hello?
Hearing you loud and clear.
Okay, sorry, the connection seemed lost.
No,
I hope that it is now clear that when it comes to the sale or disposal of Jame's assets, that it was the High Court that ordered and conducted the sale of the cattle. That it was the Jame Commission that ordered and conducted the sale of the tractors and vehicles. And that it was the Jame Commission which recommended that the government sell the landed properties. And that it was the government which accepted the Commission's recommendations and approved the sale of the landed properties. My only participation in the sale of assets was as a member of a 4-person ministerial task force, which was established by the President and endorsed by Cabinet in the White Paper. That I or members of my family did not buy any of the assets, be it the cattle or the vehicles or the landed properties. It is also now clear that I identified Augustus Pom to the High Court as the receiver under Section 51, subsection 4 of the Anti-Money Laundering Act. It is now also clear that I did not terminate or sack Augustus Pom. His mandate as receiver under the High Court order expired pursuant to Section 51, subsection 8 of the Anti-Money Laundering Act. Even his representative admitted in his testimony before this committee that their mandate as receiver under the High Court order had expired. It is also clear, Mr. Chair, that it was the Jame Commission which recommended that a new receiver be appointed to replace Augustus Pom. I refer this committee to Volume 1, page 31, and Volume 4, pages 18, 52, 85, 119, and 172. In the same way that I identified all 3 commissioners and the secretary to the President, unidentified lead counsel to the commission, unidentified Augustus Pom to the High Court.
So, Mr. Tambedou,
Yes, Chair.
may I come in, please? Now, after your testimony for today, I understand my colleague gave you a chance to say some few words. But I would have advised if you allow the committee to proceed, because we still have a few more days to go. And when we are done, perhaps if there is anything more to clarify on your issue, we will get to you. Otherwise, we will go into our report writing. But of course, we have heard from you and most of your colleagues as well. And I think the committee will take it from there. All the evidences that we have before this committee that will enable us in writing our report. So I want to interject that yes, in as much as you have right to make statements, but the statements will be going directly into the affairs of the committee when we be writing our report. So I would allow for you to hold on to here and allow the committee to proceed with the inquiry until we close. But in any event, when we have any issue to clarify with you going further, our investigation team or legal counsel will get to you, and then those clarifications will come in even before we get our report ready. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Hello? Yes?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Okay, I'm hearing.
Mr. Chair, I believe what I'm doing now is to give this committee my closing opinion. And in any process underpinned by fair hearing, this is allowed. I am summing up my views to this committee for the record, so that the committee is clear about what my position is regarding these issues. And I don't think it does any harm for the committee to hear me on this. Now, I will not push the matter because the record speaks for itself. I'm sure the committee will come to its own conclusions, but nevertheless, there is nowhere in the world where a hearing of this nature is held without a witness being afforded the opportunity to provide their concluding remarks. But in any event, I will not push the issue. I will crave the committee's indulgence to give me maybe 2 minutes, because I want to send a message out there, and it's important, and it's for our country as a whole.
That is where I wanted to come in. When you came the first time, I had given you the opportunity to, do a closing remark, and which you have done. Now, the committee has gone to a point that, yes, we have not completed the inquiry, but if I would have it from you, I think this will be a convenient time for us to stop, and then you allow the committee to continue when we are done. I'm sure all the evidences we have. I'm not saying you didn't have the right to say anything to this committee. And of course, if you have any concluding opinion, you can as well write to the committee, of course, and I think we will put it into consideration. But you say the committee will not want to, because I think something had happened that we do not want to repeat again, because this committee is operating and not on the opinion of the people, of course, evidences that we have before us. And this is what we are going to rely on for our report writing. So like I said earlier, when you came, I had given you an opportunity, and then you've said some few words before you leave. Today, yes, you can allow the committee to proceed. We will close very soon. And when we close, if you had any opinion, perhaps you can write and send it to the chairperson. Of course, we will do a consideration as well.
Mr. Chair, I will certainly do that. But what I crave your indulgence for is for 2 minutes for me to remind. It's just a reminder to the public. It's something that I said back in 2020 when I was making my last public appearance as Attorney General, and I said something, and with extraordinary prescience, I just wanted to recall that, and I think it will be for the benefit of not just the committee, but the entire country as a whole, about our country and and our state of affairs right now. If you allow me, I won't take more than 2 minutes. It's just a short paragraph that I want to recall.
Tell me if you allow me to come in. Because, you know, that is why I'm trying to stop you. Because I don't want you to address, you can address the committee, of course, but not on the issues specifically that we're dealing with currently. And that is why I came in.
Oh, no, it is not on the issues that you're dealing with specifically. No.
Okay.
This is just a general remark.
All right.
May I? For just 2 minutes. It's a short paragraph.
Okay,
Maybe
we can hear you now. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. As I said back in 2020, in my last public appearance as Attorney General, I said the following, as if I knew what the future holds. And I said this. I said the biggest threat to our peace and fledgling democracy is misinformation. I implore the media to be mindful of your critical role in a fragile democracy such as ours. Do not turn your supporters in government against you by your actions. Do not, under the guise of freedom of expression, ruin the lives and reputations of others simply because you can. In small communities like ours in this country, the consequences of publishing false information can be devastating. The people you write about have families too. Their kids go to school with other kids. Their spouses interact with others at work and other public places. By all means, expose corruption and corrupt practices in government. But I encourage you to do so with facts. It will only enhance your credibility. Do not allow those with a partisan, political, or narrow personal agenda to use you to smear others, because when you do, you will also discourage honest and hardworking Gambians from accepting to serve in public office, and consequently deprive this country of the best human resources talent that we need to develop our country. These were my words, Mr. Chair, back in 2020 at my last public appearance. And as I said, with extraordinary presence, I uttered those not knowing what 5 years down the line will entail. But I thank this committee for the opportunity. I thank each and every one of you for the opportunity that you have given me to respond to your questions. I wish to thank the legal team at the National Assembly for their respectful attitude to me, for their professionalism, and I would like to thank all the other members of the National Assembly service and support team who made my appearance before the committee in person and virtually today successful. I wish to end here, and I hope not to hear from this committee again, Mr. Chair, but I will share my closing remarks with you after these proceedings today. But I thank you very much, and thank you for your understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Tambedou. Thank you so very much. It's a pleasure having you. And of course, I have to also state that, just like you said, this committee will always go after facts, and I think we will do that. We are not going to operate on hearsay on any other thing, but of course, only on facts. Just to assure you that. But we thank you for being with us. I mean, during this period, I think your testimony will support this committee in, getting the facts that we wanted to support us in our report writing as well. At this point, I'll have to close and allow you to also do your businesses over there. And this committee also will wrap up because we are still proceeding with our committee of supply. I know you are used to that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tambedou. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Nice day.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
All right.